the distinction. Now, when we get to the investment advisory side, there's never both. There is never both. It's either going to be the SEC or the state, never both. So if you're being asked about a broker dealer, broker dealers are going to register with the SEC and they're going to register with at least one state. Because remember this whole thing about no office, no retail client, no register. Well, broker dealers got to have at least an office somewhere, right? I mean, even if they're not doing retail business, right? Goldman Sachs may not have any retail customers, but it has an office in New York, so they're going to have to register, right? The key thing is this idea of how we're compensated, whether we're being compensated based on assets under management, a fee, or whether we're being compensated, the firm, through transactions. Now it says securities for its accounts of others. And again, it's like learning foreign language or learning legalese. Whether we're acting in our broker, the firm agency capacity and charging commissions, right? That's when we're acting for customers. That's what we do. I say, hey, as your agent, we reached out, we got the security elsewhere, and now you owe us a commission. Or whether we're acting for our own account, that means we're acting in our dealer principal capacity. And there we don't make commissions. We make markups or markdowns. And as I said, the key point in the test always is disclosure. In what capacity and where are these disclosures found? This disclosure would be found on your confirmation of your transaction. I say, if you look at your confirmation, you'll see what capacity our firm acted. Did we charge you a markup or markdown, or did we charge you a commission? Now, very important on the test, you are not a broker dealer, right? You're an agent of the broker dealer. Sure isn't a broker dealer. Now, there are some businesses that sound very similar to broker dealers, but they're not. And one of those, when you say, well, a bank or trust company, when they're in the trust department, is transacting, buying and selling securities. But the reason they're not a broker dealer is they don't charge for that, right? If I'm a trust officer and I'm buying and selling securities in your trust account, I'm not being compensated by the transactions. And that means that bank or trust company isn't a broker dealer, right? So they're not a broker dealer because, this is a key point on your exam: compensation. Is there compensation? If there's compensation, then it's a different issue. For transactions, remember, for transactions. Okay, so we said this was the way to remember this. No office, no retail customer, no register with the state. No office, no retail client, no register. So please note here, what all these things have in common is these are not Joe Sixpacks. These are not retail clients. They're not living, breathing human beings walking planet Earth. And the other thing to think about is who's supposed to protect them? Not the state administrator. The state administrator is to protect retail customers, Joe Sixpacks, not protecting institutional investors. Who's supposed to protect their assets? Themselves, right? All these people, all we're looking at here. So another thing I would say is you don't want to try and memorize these laundry lists. There's a lot of these laundry lists. What you want to try and get is the big concept. And the big concept is the estate administrator doesn't protect institutional investors. The state administrator protects Joe Sixpack retail customers. And if you're not a retail customer, well, then you're kind of on your own, right? Because, these are organizations, entities here that are capable of protecting their own interests, their own assets. They got attorneys, they got whatever, right? So please no, these no retail customers here, right? Now, here's a test scenario. I am a agent of a broker dealer, and I have an office, and I have retail clients in Minnesota. And so, one of my clients is in Las Vegas. He's trying to get out of the snow, and he's in Las Vegas, and I call him with an investment opportunity. The question is, does Dean need to register the broker dealer and the agent of the broker dealer in the state of Nevada? The answer is no. The state administrator of Nevada calls me and says, hey, Dean, were you transacting with residents of my state? I go, no. The person I was talking to is a resident of Minnesota, protected by the state administrator of Minnesota. So if you have an existing customer who goes to some other state and you're servicing them, they're not a resident of the other state, they're just visiting, right? In my example, sometimes we refer to this as a snowbird because this is maybe somebody in Minnesota is going to Scottsdale or Arizona
Mhm.
or Nevada to avoid the the inclement weather, right? So that is a scenario where a retail customer I'm not going to have to register. I say, hey,
So
you happen to be in New York? I'm in New York too. Why don't we meet at the bar and talk about get caught up on your portfolio? You're not a resident of New York. I don't have to register in New York.
does the state administrator, okay, so you're in Nevada. Does the state administrator in Nevada have any authority because it was initiated in Nevada?
Well, a separate issue on the test. Right now, we're talking about a registration of a broker dealer and on the periphery, the agent of the broker dealer. We're not talking about the transaction of
Okay.
the transaction. That's called jurisdiction, and you're on the right track, right? If I'm directing the offer into the state of Nevada with, intentionally, and I know I'm making an offer in Nevada, that's a different part of the exam about whether that transaction is there's jurisdiction, right?
Hmm.
I kind of joke. I mean, I think of it kind of like the police. Even if you're a resident of Minnesota and a police officer in Nevada pulls you over, the state trooper does have jurisdiction, right? And whether or not you're a resident of Minnesota, you have me a Minnesota license. I say, well, you happen to be in Nevada and we still have jurisdiction here in this state. So that transaction is a separate question. So that's where I told you this question is so challenging because RTFQ, read the full question, RTFA, read the full answer set. Whether the state administrator has jurisdiction over a transaction is a separate issue on the test, not
Okay.
about whether the broker dealer or agent has to register. And the
Got it.
context would be they would set that up for you in the context. And as I said, oh, I don't, I'm not laughing at her, I'm laughing with her, but she's one of my favorite students here of late. And the reason she's one of my favorite students is because, can you imagine this? Her primary language is Mandarin. And she would call me and say, Dean, I'm putting these terms into my Google Translator and nothing comes back. And she goes, why do you think that's funny? I said, well, I don't think this is in English to begin with. So, I mean,
Right.
I think it's legalese. And so, it's almost, you almost got to read the question once or even maybe twice to just kind of get a handle about what is this question about. It was
Right.
funny. I had another young lady I was tutoring, and one of the things I suggest we do is project what we think the answer is going to be. And she came up with, but I covered up the answer set, and she came up with the most vulgar kind of an answer. I said, well, that answer is correct, but we know that that's not how NASA is going to offer that to you in the answer set.
Uh-huh.
When I do the reveal, I'm going to have to, put that into English, right? It'll be plain English, which is different than legalese, right? So,
Yeah. While we're on that topic, just
yep,
real quick, so I have a Kaplan account and I've done my Series 66 through that.
yeah.
And my Q Bank, as I'm going through it, when I took the 66, like the verbiage is just different. I feel like from the Kaplan Q
Well,
Bank.
I
Do
saw
you
in your
have?
notes. Did you get Test Geek? Did you get the Test Geek too? I thought I
I
saw that.
did.
Yeah,
I did.
Brian does a great job. So, as
Yeah.
you continue to work, we want to get you. You do need to, best practice is to get this date after you've how fresh is the hurt from missing the mark? Is it like recent or
So I took it on June, I think it was June 17th.
okay? So we've had some time to kind of refresh and reset.
Yeah.
Um, Two things. One is I think Brian does a great job. Have you done his practice test already?
I have, and I was just going to ask if you would suggest anyone else or any others.
Well, yeah, the correlation for the Bryans is pretty good. I mean, you've already
Yeah.
taken, I mean, it's based on debrief. So that's a good resource. What I would tell you too is moving forward with Kaplan, send me any QIDs that you have that you're not quite sure. You don't have to book another tutoring session. I'm more than happy to hop on a Zoom real quick and walk you through the question and like, okay, what is this question about?
Okay.
Kaplan, the guy at Kaplan who's the subject matter expert is a guy named Chuck Lowenstein. He's him and I every once in a while get into it a little bit about his questions and but he purposely is trying to stretch your mind a little bit so it doesn't go back. I think Kaplan is the best Q bank and it has that performance tracker and that's what you really want to be paying attention to.
Mhm.
But I believe in abundance, and if you have the resources, like have the resource to book an hour of tutoring. If you have the resources to buy an STC Q Bank, they have supplemental exams you can buy. I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Okay.
Just don't get so many different voices in your head that you're starting to go backwards on that. What you're looking for is confirmation. So if you want to buy, I'm not a big fan of achievable in terms of correlation to the exam. But if you just need a different voice, that's a lower cost alternative.
Okay.
STC, Knopman uses the Kaplan Q Bank. But if you need some more resources, don't hesitate to get those. And
Okay.
I don't think many test takers are monogamous. I think they use whatever they can to kind of find the points. And then don't beat yourself up too bad. I mean, 70 isn't, it's not like you were clueless. I mean, it's not like you're in left field somewhere. I mean, so we need to bring everything up. The other thing I would do, if you haven't done it already, is print out the test specifications. Have you ever seen that before?
I have them here. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'd like you to do through that, and I love your notes. I said, okay, that's a big agenda you have, but I'm hoping that that comes from your own kind of intellectual inventory debrief you did with yourself.
Yeah.
And say, here's where I need to find these points. And what you want to do is use that test specification, kind of like a performance tracker. And what I suggest is people go through it and put plus, zero, or minus next to each item. So what I mean by that is plus means you think you were above par passing, and that was not what did you in. That doesn't mean we're not going to review it again because you want to got to bring everything above par. Zero means at par in that particular thing you see in the test specification. And then what we're really looking for, and it's counterintuitive, is a minus where you go, okay, I don't think I was squared away on that. That's
Yeah.
something I could spend some time on, get those points, more points I'm entitled to. And then
Yeah.
you want to pay attention to the weighting when you do that. There's two things for the 66. There's a test specification document PDF on NASA, and there's also a study guide on the NASA site. Both of those documents I think are pretty helpful, and just in terms of staying on track. So if you're not quite clear, like for example, whether this is a Kaplan question that gets you in the weeds, then you could look on there and go, what? I don't see that as being a big deal. And as I told you, I think Brian does a good job of distillation. So he has his little class notes thing there in that cheat sheet that is really, I think, kind of cool too. So that's another area for you to find some points as well.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I would suggest in terms of that. What's your QBank usage on Kaplan?
Like how many of my QBank questions have I used? Oh gosh, you know what? I don't know. I guess I'd have to go back and look. I haven't
Okay,
really paid
so
attention to
okay, well,
the
so if I were your corporate trainer, I'm not, but if I was, that would be the first thing when you missed your mark, I would pull up. I would pull up your Kaplan QBank usage rate. And particularly if you're saying, hey, Dean, these Kaplan questions I saw, and I said, well, how do you know? How many did you do? There's a
yeah,
direct correlation between QBank usage rate and passing or not passing. So my inclination is when you go back and look at that, that would the only reason I bring it up is because that would also be a determining factor on whether I want to buy another set of questions. If what you've said to me about the Kaplan questions then matches that you've got a 70-80% Kaplan QBank usage rate, well then I'd say, yeah, let's go buy STC or let's go buy Achievable or whatever, Pass Perfect to get some more questions. But if we punch up that QBank usage rate and you're at 30-40%, well, then that means you don't need that because you haven't exhausted or even come close to exhausting all the practice questions that are available to you with the Kaplan performance tracker, which is really key because that shows you where those areas are too, as I
right.
mentioned, like our intellectual inventory. So that's good when you see red there because that means, okay, there's another area where I can go find some points.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I've been doing. Like I'll take what I've been doing is just doing like the like mock exam where they just put 100 questions together.
Yeah.
I do that, then I look at my rate,
Right.
then I look to see where I'm right, like you said, in the red. Then I'll go
Uh,
back and redo just those sections
are
and
you
then
uh,
retake again.
are you seeing repeat questions yet or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I do have the option to not see repeat questions, but I never select that. I just
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that would be something to change it up just a little bit. What are
yeah.
you scoring on these mocks you're creating?
So, yesterday I did one and it was a 68. The day
Okay.
before was a 74. Couple days before that was a 70. So I'm still like,
Well, I tell you, as your tutor, like I say, it's you're not going to have a magical kind of. It's unfortunate, but right, you got to grind it out. I don't think those scores are too bad. I would want you to get a date, and what we want to be is routinely in the mid 70s. We get
okay,
those scores that still pass, but we want to have it. Particularly, this is your second time. We want to make sure that you have a margin of safety, right? We want to know that when you go down there, you're going to make your mark this time, not put yourself in a position where you're staring at this thing a third time because that becomes a pretty precarious, right? You don't want to be doing on
yeah,
your third attempt.
yeah,
But there's no reason to believe, and that's why most firms, by the way, are pretty forgiving with people who come close but don't pass because it is a sign you put in the work. Like I say, it's not that you're clueless. It's this whatever you changed answers, you got a bad draw, who knows what it is. Any other given day, you could have, I'm dating myself, but I call this the Dean rule. Back in the day, if you got a score like you did, I would say just cue it up again because it's very likely you could pass the next draw. And I think I did that too often. Now they make you wait 30 days, but before there was
yeah.
a 30-day wait period, I would just tell you, hey, just write your check and go again. Just stay down there until you
I
get it done.
know.
Because with that kind
And
of score,
that's,
you could.
I know. And that's what I worry about. I was like, oh, I wish I could just take it in another couple days, like freshen up on
Yeah.
on the areas that I know I was lower on, take it
Uh,
again. But now I'm like, oh, I'm just trying to keep what I already have
yeah. And who's your
in my
sponsoring firm
brain.
again? I'm just taking your notes again. Who's your sponsoring firm?
MSTC, Midwestern Securities Trading Company.
Okay. Wow. Okay. What I was going to say, so I don't want to send out negative vibes, but another backup plan would have been, and if we would have talked like while the hurt was fresh, I might have suggested what I'm going to suggest too as a backup plan. A 63-65 is equivalent of a 66.
Hmm.
So, if for some reason we miss this next mark, your point, there's no 30-day wait. And I've told people with a score like 70, I know it's aggressive, but what I would do is right now, tomorrow, go take a 63-65 because with that score, it's very likely you could pass out of those.
Okay.
That would be
Yeah.
the
And then I wouldn't have to have that 30-day wait, is what
That's
you're saying.
exactly right. Yeah, yeah. I had a young lady, her and her branch manager, both of us knew she got this back in the days when they gave scores. She got over a 90 on her Series 7, and then she missed the mark on the 66. And both of us, we're all in a quandary. I go, well, how the hell did that happen? I mean, nobody's expecting that. And I said, well, listen, her firm, it's pretty serious. I mean, if they don't pass, like, they're getting 4 months with pay to pass tests. So, I mean, if they don't pass, it's not like you're close. It's like, okay, that's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
But anyways, I said, well, that's terrible. I mean, she's good human capital. We don't want to toss her out just because of a little misfortune like this. I said, why don't you let her take a 63-65? And I think I think she'll pass that the next day. So that's another kind of path if this path, but as you said, it could be I think you told me you're not, a good test taker, that you get anxiety, whatever the case may be. So in a score like that, to be honest with you, as a tutor, that is reflects a score that you did the work, but there was some other variable. I don't know what it is. It could be anxiety, but as I said, it's not that you didn't know the information. Right. So and then you got to make sure you put in the work too, because your draw the next time could be a little different. So you got to bring
Yeah.
all those things I told you you're good at. I have people do this too, where, where they have their printout and they have an area they're strong in, and then they don't, work on that because they're working on the other things, and then that falls off the track, and then they get another printout, and that's the one that, so
Hmm.
you got to bring it all together, right? All
Yep.
right. So now we're talking about
Yep.
you
Exactly.
as an agent of the broker dealer, right? The broker dealer registration is much more straightforward than it is for the investment advisory firm and the investment advisor rep, right? So, if you get a broker dealer question, okay, broker dealer registration, pretty simple. No office, no retail client, no register, right? In the state. And we said the state's more important. We are going to register our broker dealer, certainly with the SEC, right? You have this big thing called 34, the Securities Act of 34, which made the SEC god of the securities industry, right? I mean, they have primary jurisdiction, interpretation, and enforcement of the domestic securities laws of the United States of America. So, 34 is about people and places. 33 is about prospectuses and paper. And so, yeah, and that general understanding that a broker dealer is going to have to register with the SEC, And with FINRA, I wouldn't worry about FINRA on this exam, but the SEC certainly. Now, you as an agent of the broker dealer are going to have to register. And exclusions, exemptions, don't get too hung up on the language. But remember what this means is I don't meet the definition of an agent, or I meet the definition, but I don't need to comply for whatever reason. It doesn't matter as a test point because what it means is you're not going to take a 7 and a 66 is what it amounts to, right? So here's an agent, key point, individual. Remember what that means? A living, breathing human being. So this is you with your 7 representing Midwestern, whatever you told me that was. I guess you guys are going to have to be ethically squared away if you're going to actually name your brokerage firm after the Midwest, because people would have the expectation that, we're not going to be being fast and loose here in the Midwest with some of these things, right? I tease people. I say, listen, when it comes to regulatory framework, if it sounds bad, it probably is. And you're probably not going to have to work on if you're from the Midwest. I joke if you're like me or you're from the East Coast or the West Coast, we might have to think a little harder about it. But if we even have to think about it, it's probably bad, right? So, now, remember here again, legal term, attempting. So attempting means you're still in trouble even if you fail to rip somebody off, right? So attempting to sell securities or affecting sales of securities transactions. You meet the definition. Dual registration is okay. Let's talk about this. I pick up the phone. I say, hey, Dean Tenney, E-Trade. And then, I pick up another phone, Dean Tenney, Morgan Stanley. And then you go to broker check and you see that Dean is registered with both E-Trade and Morgan Stanley. And, they go, that's up with that? Well, the holding company, Morgan Stanley, owns both Morgan Stanley's broker dealer and E-Trade's broker dealer. And that's what we mean by common control. It means there's a holding company, and this holding company that owns these two broker dealers. Can I be duly registered? The answer is yes. So that's what that term common control means. Common control means it's the same, the way we organize the securities industry and a lot of business, but our industry particularly is we typically have a holding company, and that holding company owns at least one broker dealer, but some holding companies own more than one broker dealer. So
Okay.
two broker dealers, and I just told you Morgan Stanley's holding company, which is a bank, it's a bank holding company. Morgan Stanley Bank Holding Company Corporation owns both E-Trade and owns Bank of America Merrill Lynch, right? I would imagine that Bank of America, as large as it is, probably has another broker dealer besides Merrill Lynch. It wouldn't surprise me to know they probably have 3 or 4 broker dealers doing different segments of business. And again, could I be duly registered with those broker dealers? The answer is yes, because they're under common control. Now, if it's not common control, then we have to get permission from the administrator, because the administrator thinks it's kind of a conflict of an interest to be an agent of 2 different broker dealers, right? Who's your loyalty to, basically, right? So that's what common control means, under common control. All right, let's try an example here. One of my go-to moves was say, hey, why don't you meet me up at the winery in Napa? We'll do a due diligence tour and tasting, and then we can decide about what asset allocation you might want to make to the winery. This is a Reg D private placement. So a couple points right here. It's a Reg D private placement, so I'm not going to have to register this security under 33 because it's an investment by invitation only. I'm only inviting accredited investors. This is a 506C transaction. Now, the distinction, remember, between 506B and 506C, we're talking federal, your point, right? We got to be careful about what we're being asked about. This is a 506C, so I can solicit. I can, call people, invite them to the winery. I can only sell it to accredited investors. Now, be careful. On your exam, accreditation only means one thing, that you can accept an invitation to a private placement. That's it. My go-to move, I told you, was let's go up there and do a due diligence testing, tour and tasting. And, I invite the doctor up there, doctors, attorneys, and sometimes they get upset because they want to make the investment through their pension plan. I'd say no. The only people we allow as partners of the winery are living, breathing human beings walking planet Earth. We want to be able to clink glasses with people. And sorry, doctor, we can't clink a wine glass with your pension plan. So as the general partner has said, the limited partners must be individuals. We're not going to have, these, other entities involved. And then some could, some people allow pension plans to invest, maybe not. Anyways, in this transaction, it's exempt. I'm also not going to have to register this with the state administrator through coordination or qualification because a Reg D private placement, which I'm using in this example, is a federally covered transaction, federally covered security, right? So the Reg D private placement doesn't need to be registered as a security with either the SEC or the state administrator. Now, if I'm not there, you show up at the winery, and Ed Curry is the senior vice president of hospitality, and he has the same go-to move as Dean. He says, "Hey, why don't I take you around the winery? And so besides joining the wine club, there is an investment opportunity, and if you'd like, I'd be happy to share that with you if you're a credit investor." And he signs you up. So the distinction is you invest $100,000 through Dean, the agent of the broker dealer, and you are a different investor. You invest $100,000 with Ed Curry, senior vice president of the winery. Does Ed Curry need to be registered as an agent of the broker dealer? He does not. I certainly do because whether it's an exempt transaction or not, I'm an agent of a broker dealer. He does not because, again, it's an exempt transaction. He's an employee of the winery. Here's the key point. He's not being paid for that transaction. He's not getting paid to get people involved in that investment opportunity. His salary is no different than whether you invest or you do not invest, right? So that key issue is the compensation. So under the Uniform Securities Act, boom. Let's give you another example of this one. Another example. Clark County decides to sell some mini muni bonds. Now, usually the denominations of muni bonds are 1,000, and it would be
Oh,
expected that perhaps you could invest
hey,
50,000.
Dean, I keep getting an unstable connection notification for our
Well, that's on
network.
you then. Okay, well,
I
that's good.
know.
So
I'm
now we know.
sorry.
No,
Yep.
that's you. That's you. So well, I'm glad because I got other things to do today, and I hate to say it, but I'm glad it's you and not me. I'll
Oh,
tell you
I'm
what. Why don't we just reschedule? Let's say I owe you 15, but let's toss